This is Christian from NICU, and in this video I wanted to talk about the Eurorack and the modular environment for something that's very cool about it. It's a complete composition, production, and performance environment. There's other things you can do that with, but none of them are quite as hands-on. You can compose music on it, you can produce and create the music on it, and then you can perform on it in a hands-on way that no other production environment for music, electronic music, really allows that I know of. Now, take everything I say with a grain of salt. I don't consider myself an expert. I'm learning every day, and I'm so interested in the entire topic of music making and electronic music and modular synthesizer, but I do not know what I'm talking about. This is just what I feel as I'm saying it right now today, so take it all with a grain of salt. Now, to explain this concept of the Eurorack synth as a complete production and performance environment, I'm going to be using my patch, Anamnesis II, which is behind me right here, and my performance video of this is going to be linked in obvious places, maybe on the screen right now somewhere, or definitely in the description. So if you haven't watched that performance, you can still watch this video, no problem. Maybe you go watch the performance afterwards with more knowledge of how it was made. It could be very interesting. On the other hand, if you'd like to watch the music first before I get into the breakdown, then I would suggest go listen to Anamnesis II before you watch this exploration of the patch. Anyway, moving on to this patch. What I had before it was covered in wires. What did I have on hand? What modules basically were available, the setup for this case? This case is actually basically focused around ambient music in my particular view of where I'm trying to take my interests right now. Let's really condense this down. What did we have on hand just in the big picture? We had the Mother 32, the Moog Mother 32, an analog, fully voiced synthesizer, kind of classic sound. We had a sampler. We had several digital oscillators of various types, from the more simple to the more wild, or the more flexible, I should say. And we have a lot of effects in this case, a lot of reverb, delay, multi-effects, that kind of stuff. We have the disting X, the super disting, which is super flexible, can do almost anything on Earth under the sun. And then we have, our filters. We have a nice selection of different kinds of filters, mostly analog because I like the way those feel and sound, and I like the way they can take a digital sound and rough it up, make it feel more in the real world. The analog domain, to me, makes a big difference to send those digital sounds through analog filters. We have some sequencers, some quantizers, some envelope generators, function generators, things that can provide, we have LFOs, we have things that can provide wiggly shapes, as control voltages to make other things wiggle in other places. And then we have the mixing possibilities. We have a matrix mixer, we have maths, which I don't think I ended up using, I didn't use in this patch. We have the WMD performance mixer, which I definitely used in this patch. Various VCAs, we've got a Veils in here. I use a lot of attenuversion, a lot of attenuation. I also like to use them as mixers. I think like, for example, the IntelliGel Quadrat is one of my all-time favorite modules. Just 1U, big 4 attenuators that are also attenuverters and mixers. So we've got one of those right here. It's completely used up. And another smaller, similar module over here, 3 attenuverters. So that's pretty much what we're working with, a combination of digital and analog voices, a handful of analog filters, some sequencing, some CV generation. Now, moving on. Let's talk about how this music was composed. Let's start hearing how the sounds were created and where the process took me. This started off with a pad sound about 5 days ago from today's filming. It started off actually before that with an idea. I had an idea. That's actually what happened. I was working with a notebook, this one here, that's actually just kind of helping me remember a few bullet points I want to hit in this video. And here's a thought for you. If you work in Eurorack or modular, this sort of in fact, this can work for any kind of creative, for any kind of music making, any kind of creative project, sculpture even, or painting. I think you need to be clearer. Well, you don't need to, but one decent working process is to try and maybe get clear on what you're trying to do before you start getting your hands dirty. And that clarity, that clearness can take any form you want. Like, you can be limitations you set for yourself. You need to get this done in 2 days, and whatever you have after 2 days, that's the finished product no matter what. Or you're only going to work with 60 HP of modules, a very small case. Or you're only going to use one, you're only going to use one synth. Or it doesn't have to be limitations. It could be something you wanted to learn about. You could say, you know what, in this project, I'm going to learn about how to use all the different ways I can use the color blue. Many of my most successful projects, or the ones that I feel happiest with at the end, they started off not by just leaping in and getting my hands messy, right? Sometimes it does work well to do that. But for me, I think there's a better chance of getting a favorable result. If it's a bigger, more ambitious project, it's better if I start by thinking about what I'm trying to accomplish or what the project should look like. So in this case, I did that. And I had this very clear flash of an idea, like a shower thought, basically, that what if I used the Bard Quartet quantizer? So what that can do is it can send up to 4... Think of it almost like a string quartet. It can send like 4 separate notes out to 4 different places. And it started with this idea that I've never really exploited that module as much as I want. I really haven't even come close to using it for all it's capable of. So I thought I need to use that more. I want to use it more. I want to learn it better. And so the idea that popped into my head all of a sudden, all at once, was let's use it to create 4 voice chords. Let's use all 8 harmony slots on the Bard Quartet. It has 8 chords, or chords isn't really the word, but 8 potential harmonic changes that you can program into it of your own choosing, note by note, if you want, which is what I wanted. So I thought, I already knew what I wanted to hook it up with. I was like, let's use the Mother 32 for the low notes, and we'll enhance that Mother 32 sound in various ways that I already knew I wanted to do. And then let's also supplement let's get the other 3 notes with the chainsaw oscillator, which is a digital supersaw oscillator. It's actually right here. It's very small, especially for the amount of sound you get out of it. Right here. And it's next to the Mother for a reason, along with this tiny narrow module from Takab Modular in Thailand, I want to say. Yeah, I think in Thailand. The VLH, the VCO's little helper. This thing's super awesome. And just 2 HP, it lets me get a sub-oscillator, a sub-bass from anything I plug into it virtually. And I think that just sounds so great with the Mother 32, just instant extra oomph on the low end. Actually, so why don't I demonstrate these sounds? Enough talk. Okay, so I messed with this several different ways throughout the composition, but this general sound that we're going to look into right now was always part of the piece. Let's bring in this other important sound. Not that one. There we go. Oh, isn't that just lovely? Should have faded that in a little smoother. Yeah, a lot going on there all of a sudden. But this is more or less where the patch started. Here, let's take... We didn't have the beads in there yet. We didn't even have the reverb in there yet. Pretty much we had something that sounded like... Actually... Sorry, I'm trying to find the exact chord we started with. Okay, so what you're hearing now is where this musical composition basically got started. It's a 4-voice chord, although technically every note is just playing a C. Or actually, it's probably not a C, but it's programmed as a C. It's tuned. I don't know what it's tuned in. It doesn't matter, because it's electronic music, and I wasn't looking at a tuner. But this is one spread note across multiple octaves, and it's split across 4 different individual oscillator voices, 4 different sounds. So imagine a string quartet. We have the Mother 32 on bass, right there, and then we have 3 more notes, maybe not 3 right now, but the other 3 notes, whatever we choose, the other 3 notes are spread throughout this super saw oscillator. This is also going through a filter right now. Beautiful. Beautiful sounding filter, eh? But that's not all I can do either. So this is the Shackmat Dual Dagger stereo filter. We're running in stereo. This pad is in stereo, by the way. That was always kind of part of the plan. Whoa. It was always kind of part of the plan, was to run it in stereo for the pad, get that full sound on both sides of your head. And the chainsaw oscillator is already stereo. It's intended for this purpose. And it was just basically kept it in stereo the whole way through. So then it went into this stereo filter. And it's a kind of a DJ style filter where you can take the lows and the highs. It also has resonance on it. I kind of kept that noticeable but not ear-cutting. And throughout most of my piece, I never went into this kind of really super bright territory with the opening it up that much. Kind of kept it more in there. Just really kind of classic, beautiful saw wave style pad sound. Okay, so that's where we started. Then I started programming harmonies into it. I remember all this because it took me quite a while. Let's see if these can... Using the Bard Quartet, which can kind of send these notes and these pitches. Okay, so those are all 8, believe it or not. So those are the 8 chords that I've programmed into this thing. I took the bass out, right? So I should have left that in. Let's just hear it one more time. And you know what? This time I'll put the sub bass back in. Remember, I sort of supplemented the sound of the Mother 32. Ooh, you hear? Listen to that one more time. Oh my God! If you've got a subwoofer, your room just started. Now, if you push that too far, it's going to drown out the sound of the Mother itself. So I probably had it somewhere right about there. Now let's hear those harmonies again with the bass. You know what? Hold on. Okay, it'll change. All right, it's a long story. It's not going to change right away. Okay, so we're hearing these harmonies with the bass now. Ooh, good Lord. Okay, so we have our 8 harmonies, and I programmed those in note by note, messed with the voicings, the octave locations, and so working with all that together, I kind of created this pad and bass sound with the harmonies, and that took me a while, maybe half a day messing with that. And I'm sure I could have improved it further if I spent more time on it. There are a couple harmonies in there that are definitely pretty questionable. What I was going for specifically, and what I kept testing, was what happens if you run these harmonies with some sort of randomness or sequence. I didn't really know what I wanted to use at the time. I just knew that I wanted the synthesizer changing harmonies on its own. So let's end up hearing what I ended up doing. Simple, pretty simple option. So what I ended up doing to make the harmonies change on their own was I sent essentially some random voltages on a triggered pattern. So they're not going to be changing all the time, but you hear, obviously, I'm not doing anything, am I? And both the bass and the pad are changing at different speeds. And they're just choosing one harmony to the next. It's just basically randomly selected. But I've chosen the pace at which it can change. And I also decided to add some element of probability beyond the randomness, which is that it won't always change harmonies at the same time. It'll sometimes skip a harmony change, so it would hold a little while longer. As for the bass, I've sort of sped it up for the purposes of this video to show you what's happening, but you'll notice the bass is changing after the chord a lot of the time. A little bit after the chord. Let's make that more obvious. Hold on. I can make that more clear. See, the bass is changing. It's almost like a sus style harmony where the chord changes above the bass and then the bass catches up. I thought that was a pretty cool trick. That took me a little bit of figuring. What we're doing there is we're using a sample and hold, which allows, basically, it lets me choose when the bass will be updated. It gets the news a little bit after everybody else, and I get to choose when that happens. To do this all, basically I'm using 2 channels of this module, Steppy by IntelliGel, and it makes it's a step sequencer, so it lets me give timings. When do things take place? Anywhere from a drum beat, we could slow it down much more and tell it to send off a grandfather clock sound every hour. You could slow it way down, right? It doesn't have to be a drum beat. And so here we're using it to provide harmonic timing for both the bass and the chords. There's at least one other critical element of the sound on this pad, and I've kind of left it out until just now, although you did hear a hint of it earlier. This is also running through beads, mutable instruments, absolute classic. Hear the reverb come in, listen. Hold on, let's try that again. There's the bass, hold on. The reverb's not on the bass, the reverb's on the pad. Ooh, this is gonna sound nice, I've always liked this. Listen. Listen. Becomes this choral sound. Doesn't it? Beautiful sounding. Beautiful. Yeah. And we can also, as we do at some points in... Listen. Beautiful. Ooh, sounds like violins or something to me. So beads adds a nice element of character to the sound, doesn't it? It really does. And of course, also in stereo, there's that pad. So this was, remember, let's not lose track of what we're talking about here. We're talking about composition, production, and performance in the Eurorack environment. If you've done it before, then maybe you understand what I'm talking about. If you've wondered, on the other hand, how this all takes place, well, this is how it works out for me a lot of times. So I'll start with a limitation or a project idea that developed, or a learning concept I want to learn more about. And it develops into some sort of sound that I then work, I'm actually interested enough to be like, you know what, that could go, I could kind of do more with that. And pretty soon you've got something that kind of begs to be continued. And so that's what I felt I had here. I didn't go into this expecting to spend a week on the project. I don't know what I was expecting to do. Maybe just learn for an hour and then unplug it all. That's not what ended up happening. So I created this sound. I really liked it. And so from then it became, so what do you do next? Which is the question that haunts us all, isn't it? What do you do now? What's the follow-up? What is the follow-up? So it actually becomes sort of hazy at this point, doesn't it? But what I think I did next was I went with, let's hear what we've got. beautiful sound. What I wanted next was another synth sound. I wanted a sequence. I wanted some kind of sequenced sound in there that was higher up, of course. We got the bass and the low mids really starting to fill out all the way already. So I bounced around between a bunch of ideas. That's probably why it's unclear to me in my head. What I ended up landing on was let's use mutable instruments, Platts. Why? Because I thought this is an ultra flexible module. It can make a trillion sounds. There's got to be something in there that's going to fit the mood. In terms of what I was going to sequence it with, I went back to a module I have not used in a very long time, the Erica Synth's Pico sequencer, PicoSeq, and it's got this charming little digital display. I find it's great. I'm not knocking it. It's a great module, extraordinarily powerful for its size at only 3 HP, but a full-featured 16-step sequencer in 3 HP. I mean, it's got two push-button knobs and 2 tiny little buttons plus a screen. It's extremely fiddly, and I've never mastered it. It also makes a lot of use of color coding, and I'm colorblind, so that makes it really hard for me. Anyway, but I don't want to give up on it. I think it's a cool module, super cool. So I started using the Pico sequencer. I started using the Platts as the voice, and I was just experimenting, running it through different filters. I do love Platts. If you want to sound digital, it's got so many ways it can make cool digital sounds. But this piece, I mean, let's hear it again. It was shaping up, let's be real, just to sound extremely analog. Like, right, it's sounding extremely analog here. And it was sort of jarring to use a very obviously digital sound in this, amidst this bed. Therein was the next problem. How do we use Platts and make it sound analog? There's no surprise that it ended up being left on its most classic sounding model, which is the first model in Platts. I think it's a saw and a saw wave and a square wave overlapping. Okay, let's hear what ended up happening, because I could talk your ear off about how I fiddled with the sequence and kept trying this and that. And spoiler alert, it was very fiddly, and it was just a lot of trial and error, and it didn't start the way it ended. But here's how it ended up. Let's at least hear it for now. Right? So that's pretty cool. And you can hear that digital. You can hear that it sounds digital if you've got the kind of the ear for it. But it's going through an analog filter. And I think it sounds wonderful. And that analog filter is ripples, also by Mutable Instruments, which is a multi-mode filter. So it's just obscenely flexible in terms of the... I mean, within a certain range, it's going to sound like an analog resonant filter no matter what you do with it. But it's got a band pass, a high pass, a low pass, and I'm running all of those through a mixer. Now you can barely see, this is one of the funny things about this patch that I learned as I went. These are, right where my hands are right now, these are primary performance areas. Like, these are key areas. And it's pretty funny, right? Because there's just, I feel like I'm reaching into the Millennium Falcon or something to do maintenance with a spanner, right? Tiny, tiny little area with you'll never be able to see. There are 5 tiny pots in this much space, and 4 of them do something very, anyway, way too much power in way too small space. But, so this is the sound of the sequence. Let's layer it with everything else so far. There's that bass. Sounds cool, right? And the bass is gonna be changing. I mean, it sounds nice. Right? And it starts to suggest to you ideas, structures, moods. It sounds great, I think. It sounds good to me. I like that sound. And so, okay, so if you want to hear the piece, you can go listen to it. And you can immediately start to understand, if you're not familiar with this type of music making, it's a very improvisatory style. It's a very transient style, because once this is taken down, you're never building it again. Never in a million years, a million lifetimes. Are you going to put this patch together and make it sound the same way? Unless you're just a total obsessive. It'd be so hard and so time consuming, and like, why? Why not just build a new one, you know? And so, a very transient artistic style, which is one of the great things about it, because for someone like me who has trouble staying focused, it forces me to focus, because if I don't work on it now, it's not going to be there again, ever in my life, anyone's life. And so because of that, I kind of thought, all right, I like where this is going. I like the... We cut out the, excuse me, we cut out that, we never put the pad in, did we? Here we go. Yeah, there we go. Let's let the bass change. So I mean, and look, it's just playing itself. Mission accomplished, right? I mean, as so far as it goes, I was more than happy with where this piece had progressed to, and it's playable. It's highly playable already. Filters, play the filters. That's all you need to do. I have 3 filters or more, depends on how you count. And that's not even counting the mixer channels. I mean, I could play the... This is, I mean, look how... Excuse me. look how phenomenally powerful it just... This is just a few modules in this case. It's not all of them. You could do this with a much smaller system. Right? You know? So, hey, you either love this stuff or you're like, what is he going on about? Okay, I love it. I happen to love it. Now we've got some layers built up, right? We've got a pretty cool sound bed going on. But as far as like, I don't know, you know, then you start to, then it gets harder and harder in a way, because you start to think, well, yeah, but it's not like, is that like a whole song? Or like, how long does that go for? Like, what do you do? What else? There should be more? Should I leave it at that? And no, it needs more. It needs drums, doesn't it? I almost had to bring them in right there. It was hard not to. It needs drums, doesn't it? And at this point, I can tell you what I started thinking. M83. I started thinking M83. You know what this reminds me of? You know what this feels like? You know who I wish I was? I wish I was M83. So I started kind of playing that up a little bit as I was composing those layers that we had so far. And especially in the early days of this piece, it was much more in your face, and I loved the sound of it back then too. It was cool. It was like a much more just frontal assault sound. Anyway, from here we needed some drums, so let's talk about what we did for drums. The obvious choice was the assimilator, and I sort of already had a sound that I liked. I pulled up that drum kit and just kind of messed with it. Let's just hear. So we can do it this way. So you can hear the first thing that I put in is actually this kick. No, not that one. This one. Didn't have a delay on it. So we just programmed in this kick. Not long after that, we added another kick. There we go. Very different kick sound. It's a little weird in isolation to hear them. I actually made a mistake when I was programming it. I still don't understand what I did, but it kind of switches back and forth between the 2 kicks, which ended up sounding nice. Much later, I ended up adding a delay echo, which sounds great, but in the performance that I put up on YouTube, I think I forgot that I had this delay and I never turned it on. I wish I'd remembered that delay was there, because it's pretty cool. We also got a snare from the same kit, and it also did not have a delay on it. There we go. So I programmed the rhythms into steppy, real simple, obviously, real simple rhythms. And it took me a little bit of messing to get a sound I liked, And it shouldn't be heard in just in isolation, right? Let's hear it with everything else, because that's how I was making it. Right? Kinda cool. Ooh. Around this time, I also, maybe before or after, somewhere around this time, added this sound. Here, hold on. I know we're talking about drums, but that's pretty much how the drums got there. I added this other sound, listen. Now I know it sounds a little abrasive, annoying. Listen, it's fine. Listen. It's a little out of tune. It's actually kind of on purpose. There we go. And so I can fade this, I can level it, balance it with this attenuverter over here. And it's also running through the same filter as the arpeggio. They're together in the same, they're mixed together. So that gives you some cool performance options, right? What I ended up doing a lot of the times, I would bring that in near the second half of the performance, let it swell up a little bit more. And at that point, you don't hear it so much, right? And it's also okay that it's a little bit out of tune. If anything, it kind of adds a chorusing, kind of a beating feel that really fills out the sound. It's kind of subtle, you don't really hear it, but it's also, you know, moving up and down, and against all the different chords that we hear throughout the piece. It's sometimes more dissonant, sometimes more harmonious, and in the background, especially during the build-ups at the end of the song, it's at the end of the piece, it's kind of a cool layer that's sort of subtle. That's the 1U IntelliGel analog oscillator that's buried down in here. To tune it, I have to get my fingers right here. There's a tiny tuning knob that goes across like 8 octaves, and I kept having to retune it. Now that's going through the Mutable Instruments stages, is doing the sequencing, just 2-note sequence, and also adding that slew or that delayed pitch bending effect. And that's happening over here. It's happening on a trigger. It's getting some kind of probability-based clock, I think. So Twigs is giving a probability of actually that note going. There's gonna be a probability it can go down and up again. So you never really know when it's going to happen exactly. You just have to wait. So now let's hear how everything's kind of sounding at this point to me in the composition. Just put it all together. Sometime around here, I would have run it through a muscle compressor module by WMD, which is right here. And I would have also had to sort of figure out some solutions for mixing all these stereo and mono sounds. Of course, the WMD Performance Mixer is very full-featured and can handle a lot of that itself. But I'm also supplementing it with the Axis, also by WMD, and the Nearness Mixer by Tikop Modular. Sounds cool, right? And at this point, it's really feeling like something I can do a lot with. I can perform it, I can mess with it, but I realize it's missing something in the high end, isn't it? We need some kind of high end sound. And there's there's also stuff. It's bugging me that there's like a chunk of modules that are not being used, and they're some of my most powerful digital modules. One of them was the Disting X, the Super Disting, right here. Needed to use that for something. It's so flexible, so powerful. I thought right about this time in the composition, time to figure out a role for that bad boy to play. Didn't know what, but what I ended up settling on after thinking about, it can be a utility, it can help other modules become more powerful. I could save it to be a multi-effects unit. It can be split down the middle and act like 2 separate modules. It can be combined into one. It can be a sound source. It can do so many things. what I ended up doing with it was using it for its amazingly good multi-sample player. And I just kind of scrolled through the sound library, and when I landed on, what did it say? Happy? I don't know, H-A-P-Y, harpsichord maybe? Happy verse xylophone. That's the name of this sound that I just saw it, and I was like, well, that sounds okay. That sounds kind of like what I'm looking for. So let's kind of hear where I took that. So this, you can hear where it ended up going, and then we can maybe talk about how I got there. What's going on? Here we go. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so just imagine that all I heard was that sound. That's it. That's all we heard. Now, it wasn't even changing pitches. I ended up programming a short, I thought that could use a kind of a short looping sequence, real slow. I mean, right? That sounds like it would kind of fit in. So there's the sequence you're hearing right now for those bell xylophone notes is not what it started off as. It's been fiddled with. There's been 80 different variations. This isn't even my favorite one. There were several that I liked way more that, like everything else in modular, once it's gone, it's gone. And so actually what's going on that's sort of interesting also is that this xylophone sound and the pad sound are now running through the same mixer, which is the Tacob nearness mixer. And that means I had to use Axis to provide some volume control options for the pad, which I thought I was pretty proud of this kind of sort of creative solution in my mind to needing more stereo mixing and volume controls. This was begging for some effects, isn't it? It kind of needs to have some echo on it. Use the Chronoblob digital delay. Yeah, mess with it until I like the small little echo there. It's nice, I think. Right? And then it needed even a little bit more high-end, in my opinion, so I found this shimmer reverb. I know shimmer is kind of a meme. Come on, that sounds nice. In isolation, there it is. And so now we have that real high-end thing, and now overall the mix is feeling pretty well filled out. I mean, you might hate it, but at least a lot of the frequencies are being occupied. But it was still missing something. I was kind of playing with various approaches at this point. I was also sort of continually refining the sounds and the mix and the layers. But one last kind of high frequency sound I thought it needed. And I didn't know what for a while, so I just kind of, what I do when I'm not sure what else to do is I just start taking the excess cables and tucking them away a little bit more, trying to clean things up, cable management. I hadn't started wrapping everything up together yet, not to that point, but just sort of the long cables. Sometimes when you're really in a creative mood, you'll take like a 3-foot cable and patch it between two spots that are an inch apart, and you get this huge draping cable for no reason, but you don't want to mess with it because you're in the moment. So when you lose that moment, I find, okay, what's a good thing for me to do? I come back, I tighten that up, I get rid of all the excess cable, and that also helps me kind of think through what's going on in the patch at the moment. So I'd be doing stuff like that and rebalancing the mix and just tweaking little insignificant elements here and there while still trying to think. There's something missing. There's a layer. There's an entire layer missing. And really that's how this whole piece was composed, isn't it? That it was composed with the intention. About halfway through, I think I just, what I kind of decided that we're sort of going to make this a ride the faders up and down, ride the filters open and closed sort of piece, which is a very modular, Eurorack sort of composition style. In fact, it's a very electronic music sort of composition style because you only have so much direct control over everything. You're kind of operating at a robot almost, or at a distance. For me, I don't think of it as a robot. I think of it as an ecosystem that I'm sort of having an influence over, but I'm not in complete control of it at all. Not in the composition and not in the performance either. At no point am I in complete control. I'm interacting with this ecosystem. But I still felt like there was a layer missing, and I was pretty clearly, like, consciously aware that that's what my thoughts were near this point. Eventually, I just was looking for, like, Japanese voices. I wanted, like, a calm-speaking Japanese woman's voice. That's just what popped into my head. I went with it. Started looking for samples and didn't really find anything I wanted. They were sort of more like language class, like just saying individual phrases. So just on a whim, I looked for text-to-speech, and I found some text-to-speech options that would let me put in text and have it sound like a Japanese robot woman was speaking it back. And then I wrote up a text in English. I just kind of came out of my feelings in the moment and just wrote the English text, threw it into Google Translate, used the Google translation into Japanese, threw it in the text-to-speech. And so I love the way it ended up sounding, and I think it fits the whole approach to have, you know, that electronic intermediary between what I was trying to say in my human words versus what Google was able to translate and what the robot speech was able to articulate. So here's what it ended up sounding like. Keep in mind that this has been treated a little bit. But here's the sound, the speaking. Right? That's a text-to-speech. Believe it or not. If you don't speak Japanese, like I don't speak any Japanese. Now there are a few interesting things going on here. It's loaded onto an SD card and put through the assimilator sampler so that it can go into my system. And I'm using, what I thought was so interesting is I basically lowered the quality on the text-to-speech sample, drastically lowered it, kind of put it almost into more of like a 90s sampler territory. And to my ears, it made it sound much more realistic, like almost like it's been going through it reminds me of like going over an airport intercom or something. It just crunched it up a tiny bit, distorted it like a tiny bit to make it sound, to me, almost natural sounding. And then in the mix, it really, I don't know, sits kind of nicely. Now we're not really mixing this very carefully, but fade that in and out, you know? Okay, so it's just playing on loop. It actually just loops and loops, that voice, and I can bring it in and out. There is one other really cool thing that's happening. The mimetic digitalis step sequencer right here from noise engineering is sequencing various like start and end points and loop length on the sample itself. So again, if you're not a Japanese speaker, it's probably not super obvious. Like it kind of sounds like an uninterrupted phrase, but it's actually jumping back and forth and sort of rearranging the words that I'd put in. I don't even know if it ends up finishes like saying everything I told it to say, or if it's just constantly jumping back to the start. I don't really know what it's doing. I can tell that there's an element of repetition. It's not random, but it's being cut up and chopped. If there's any Japanese speakers watching this, please put the translation into chat. Let's listen.
愛する人が戻ってくるのを待っていたら二度と会うことはありません。喜んで炎の中に入ればあなたが求めるものを見つけるでしょう。で、死ぬ。一度通ったすべての道は将来再び通るたちは生まれ死ぬ。
Right, so you can hear that
すべての道は将来再び通ることになります。愛する人が戻ってくるのを待っていたら
You can hear that sounds. I also ended up putting a delay effect on it, but for some reason I can't get that delay to make a sound right now. I don't know why it's muted, but it's not super significant. It just kind of makes a little echo on the voice that I can flip on and off as manually as I please. Okay, so beyond that, I mean, I was just kind of putting finishing touches, really just tweaking and effects and mixing. from there, it really moved on to the rehearsal in the performance element. So I took a tip from Alex at WMD, and you can see my cabling that was directly influenced by him. Really needed to make some space so my hands could reach. I actually had to spend, it looks like a root system of some crazy tree. Like really, these are like really pretty firmly, like structurally, like look, I mean, they're like pretty solid. They're not gonna move anywhere. They really do feel just like roots or like, I don't know, man. It's so, I love synths so much. I really do, because this just fills me with joy. I feel like I'm in an, you know, in the Nostromo on Alien. I'm like the mechanic on the ship or something, except my ship makes beautiful music, at least when I can get it to work right. So anyway, so I tried to make room for my hands as much as I possibly could. Primary areas of interest, of course, are going to be the mixer faders and the filters, which are over here. I do regret the way I laid some of the things out in the end, but I couldn't have really known. I need to get my hands around parts of the assimilator because I need to be able to mute the drums on and off. And when I was originally programming it together, it was very important to have the Bard Quartet and the Steppy, and just kind of this whole little L section over here. I needed to have access to it so that I could program the notes and rhythms. But after that, I didn't really need to get my hands on it through the performance too much. Although I did use the Steppy at the end of some of the performances, kind of to stop the harmonic motion from continuing forward. I kind of learned to wait for the harmonic motion to, fortunately, to like basically for the synthesizer to randomly produce a series of chords that sounded like the end of the piece, and I had to kind of be listening for that. And then at the appropriate time, I could shut down the harmonic motion by pressing a few buttons, and it would just hang on that final chord, and I could start fading things out. I found that was a pretty effective ending technique, and if I forgot to do it that way, the piece kind of kept rolling on as I tried to fade out. It would kind of be like, nope, I feel like playing another 24 bars of music. You'd be like, no, stop, go back 4 bars. Like, nope, I'm gonna keep moving on. But mostly, also the beads and the axis over here, I needed control over these for fading things in and out and making the effects more or less obvious. And same thing over here on the FX Aid Pro by Happy Nerding. I needed to use that. Believe it or not, that's actually a submixer that lets me bring the chimes in and out with one knob. So that's pretty much the piece. A few other little points of interest, I guess. The fact that I can change the bell sequence with Tirana. Now, listen. Tell me that's not really gorgeous. And I can also control it a little bit with my WMD triple bipolar VCA, which you cannot see. It's over here. And it reminds me, there's other things I haven't spoken about. Like I'm using some LFOs from Oct by Instruo, and I'm using Mutable Instruments blinds for some stuff, and I'm using, stages for some other stuff, and some mixers and some VCAs. And some other probabilities to make things happen sometimes and not other times. And I'm using the WMD scalpel filter as a little sub-equalizer to get into some problem frequencies. But by and large, this is the patch. By and large, that was the composition process. And so, again, I'm going to say that the modular environment is a really great way for promoting an element of focus in your composition, your musical composition, and electronic music production and performance, because you know that once it's gone forever. You're not going to rebuild the same patch. It's just not really how it works. And I find this very favorable for setting up limitations and specific project goals for myself. Anamnesis II, the piece that came out of this, the piece that's patched up right here. Again, I want you to go watch that if you haven't seen it. If you're still watching and you haven't heard that track, then you gotta go listen to it. What are you doing? I'll make sure that's linked in an obvious place. Check out the description of this video. Maybe I put a link on the screen right now, or maybe it'll come up in 30 seconds. Thanks for listening. I hope you like this kind of Eurorack and electronic music type stuff. This is my first patch breakdown. I think it was a cool theme for me to think about. Listen, if you're still watching and you like this stuff, you can really help support I Need Your Help, basically. and I want to make this my full-time, I want this to be my career. I want NICU, making music as NICU, talking about electronic music, even maybe teaching it, sharing it, performing it, all that stuff, scoring movies, films. I want to do all this stuff for the rest of my life, but I kind of need to make a transition in my life, and I have a family to support. So a few ways you can help get this all go in the right direction. First of all, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That should be obvious, but if you're not subbed, do it right now. There's more awesome content coming out. I have so much music and so much cool stuff planned. Secondly, like the video, thumbs up, please, if you like it. Leave a comment. Super helpful for the algorithm to get comments on the video. But also, if you like the shirt I'm rocking, this is available for sale, and it directly helps support this project. I love this shirt. Yes, it does get faded up here pretty quickly, but it hasn't gotten any worse than this. It kind of faded to this nice vintage look and then stopped. So you can represent NICU, and you can help support me making more of this content and music. And I would ask that if that's possible, I'd humbly ask that you consider it. All right, thanks for now. I'm going to see you in the next video, the next performance. Who knows? It'll be coming up soon. And be sure to subscribe so I see you in the next video. Peace out.